I thought it was my internet.
Yeah, I that's what I thought too.
I did too, and I didn't want you to think I ran away.
No, thanks, Liz. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, uh, I hate this stuff, but anyway, go ahead. I'm very pleased about that. By the way, that's excellent.
Okay.
And so now, does the county have to apply for that? How do you know?
So we apply for the land that we purchase, and the county
Right.
it receives the payment. Let me, after this meeting, give you a full rundown from our real property manager, because he is the person that puts it on our list. And that way you can get all the details on how it works.
Okay.
I don't want to misspeak here, but it's an annual funding source that could be something that the LMA could seek.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to make sure that from the local level, we follow up on that. The county requests the funds and it flows through to the LMA and it's on there. It's not subject to the other allocation that they have for tax entities. So I understand. But that would be great if you could do that. That's very helpful, actually.
You bet. Yeah, we will follow up with that as an action item.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from the board or anything on this item?
Mr. President, Vice President Dolan wanted to make a comment, but she's having a bit of trouble. Let me just make sure she's gotten back on. Are you there, Jane? Could we give her just a moment to get back on, Bill?
Sure.
Some of us got bumped off the meeting.
Well, I think we all did.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing her back yet.
Okay, why don't we go back to Steve Rothert and find out whether he has his video ready yet.
Thank you, President Edgar. I think Ryan and I have sorted it out, though he deserves the credit being the controller there. Okay, so.
Okay, members, we're back on item 8A, and this is a follow-up to the report that Steve did on the
Lower Elkhorn.
The Lower Elkhorn rehabilitation project that he was talking about. And here's a little video.
Right. Okay, Ryan, whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Okay, so from this view, and hopefully it'll start moving, we are looking southwest with the vegetation in the background being the Barrow Canal along the Sacramento bypass and the northern northern levee of the Sacramento bypass. And let's see, I'm only seeing black. Others are seeing more.
So the preview works, but when I go to play it, I'm not getting.
Okay. Well, I wonder. Okay. Well, I don't want to take too much time. So yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to go forward. But I'll just say two things about what we're seeing here in a loop. So as I mentioned, the vegetation in the background is along the bypass side of the northern levee of the Sacramento bypass. And farther out, you can see a smaller strip of vegetation, which is the vegetation along the Tule Canal. So that's where the current Yola bypass east levee is. And the dark soil that you see in the foreground with the tractor or the big equipment scuttering back and forth is the beginning of the footing of what the levee will, of where the levee will be. So they're preparing the soil there for the beginnings of the buildup of the levee. And so you can see that this levee is, I think, about 1,500 feet to the north of the existing Sacramento bypass levee. Thus, and with the eventual expansion of the Sacramento Weir will essentially double the capacity of the Sacramento bypass and provide substantial flood risk reductions to the cities of Sacramento and West Sacramento. So I think that's about all we can squeeze out of this rock for now, and maybe in future updates we can provide a better video of the progress as it goes forward. So apologies for the technical difficulties here, and appreciate the opportunity to come back to it at least for a moment.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Okay, I think at this point, we're at a point where we can take a 15-minute break. Ryan, if you could put the sign up, and we'll be back at, well, I don't know, let's make it 10:35. That's not 15 minutes, is it? Whatever's 15 minutes. Thanks. Okay, Ryan, I think we can come back. Okay, I believe we're back in business now. We're going to item 9 and 9A, permit number 19216-2, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. This is an informational briefing on the proposed Howwood side channel floodplain projects. We've had this before us before, and I think the request is that they want to consider, or at least have us consider taking out one of the conditions in the permit. So at this point, we'll have our staff introduce this item, and then we'll take it up with the Nate. You want to go ahead, please?
Mr. President, before we start with that item, could I just give
Sure.
our Vice President another moment to log on? She still wanted to make a comment on the last item, but was unable to reconnect. I believe she's reconnecting by phone. Sorry for the delay. There's the WebEx was causing difficulties with her internet at home. Jane, are you there?
Yeah, this is Jane. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I hear you.
Okay. I'm going to go on speaker. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I guess everybody crashed. Maybe
Everybody
I crashed.
crashed. Yeah.
Everybody crashed, but now I can't even open anything on my computer. I just get the spinning circle no matter what I try to do. Internet, email, files,
Wow.
nothing. I've got the blue screen of death. So we'll just use the phone.
Jane, if you got the blue screen, you need to turn off your computer.
Yeah.
Just
I will.
a hard turn on.
Yeah, I'm going to go on mute right now because I have a phone call from my mom's hospital. Hang on.
Okay, let's proceed with item 9 then, Leslie, please. Nate, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, President Edgar. Good morning, President Edgar, members of the board. My name is Nate Kibret, board staff, operations branch permitting section. Agenda item 9A is an informational briefing for the Hallwood Side Channel and Floodplain Restoration Project. The applicant is the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. Prior to inviting our guest speaker to present the informational briefing, I would like to provide the board a very quick overview of the project location with respect to the board's jurisdiction. Next slide, please, Ryan.
Hey, Nate, before you go along, there's a couple of board members that are new to this project, so you might want to go into a little bit more detail than you would otherwise. But thank you.
Sure, will do. As you can see on the slide, the project site is located along the Lower Yuba River, downstream of the Daguerre Point Dam, more than 7 miles upstream of Marysville, and excuse me, in the area known as Yuba Goldfields. Next slide, please, Frank. With this close-up map, we can see the project site is located within the board's adopted designated floodway. And lastly, the project site is approximately 1.5 miles upstream of the limits of the state plan flood control levees. As President Edgar mentioned, this phase 1 of this project was presented to the board in 2017 as an informational briefing, and phase 1 was approved subsequently into January 2018. And as described in the briefing summary, the board approved phase 1 of the project under permit number 19216 in 2018. However, the board had concerns regarding the long-term operation and maintenance of the project. For that reason, the board placed condition 16, requiring the permittee, United States Fish and Wildlife Services, to secure an entity that would be responsible for the long-term maintenance of the project prior to permit issuance of each subsequent project phase. With this informational briefing, the applicants are requesting the board to remove permit condition 16 that was placed prior to approval of phase 1 under permit number 19216. With that, I would like to invite Chris Hammersmark, Director of CVEC Eco Engineering, to present the informational briefing. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. Good morning, President Edgar and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this project update. As Nate mentioned, my name is Chris Hammersmark, and I'm with CVEC Eco Engineering. We're the project designer. Before I provide a summary, I'd first like to ask Paul Cadret from U.S. Fish and Wildlife to say a few words.
Good morning, President Edgar and members of the board. Thanks for your time this morning. My name is Paul Cadret, and I'm a fish biologist and habitat restoration coordinator with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I work for the anadromous fish restoration program under the CVPIA. The service is the permitted agency for the Hullwood Restoration Project and has been working with CVEC for nearly 10 years and has provided funding for project design and permitting, as well as a large portion of the implementation costs for phases 1 and 2. I have been managing the financial assistance agreements with CVEC and am the lead Fish and Wildlife Service person on this project. And have been that for the last several years. So with that, that's all I have to say. And Chris, go ahead and back to you.
Thank you, Paul. I'd also like to ask Jeff Matthews from Yuba Water Agency to provide a few words.
Good morning, everyone. This is Jeff Matthews, Senior Project Manager with Yuba Water Agency. Well, we're very proud to be part of this project. We joined back in 2019 as the implementation lead, as well as a provider of financial support. We see great opportunities with this project out through all 4 phases, providing substantial multi-benefits to flood protection, as well as great fish spawning and rearing habitat.
Thank you, Jeff. Next slide, please. The goal of this project is to restore and enhance ecosystem processes leading to high-quality juvenile salmonid rearing habitat. In doing so, we aim to increase the natural production of fall run and spring run Chinook salmon and Central Valley steelhead on the lower Yuba River, just upstream of Marysville. This project, being originally funded by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Anadromous Fish Restoration Program, supports the Central Valley Project Improvement Act doubling goal to make all reasonable efforts to at least double natural production of anadromous fish in California's Central Valley rivers and streams. Next slide, please. Here you can see the overall project footprint, which has been broken into 4 phases, each feasible to be completed in 1 construction season lasting from about April to November. Phase 1, which is currently under construction and is shown in blue, creates or enhances 89 acres of juvenile salmonid rearing habitat. Phase 2, shown in orange, planned for implementation in 2021, is 34 acres of enhancement. Phase 3 in purple is an additional 13 acres, and Phase 4 in green is another 21 acres. Once fully implemented, the project would provide 157 acres of floodplain and riparian habitat enhancement on the lower Yuba River. The project setting is in the highly modified Yuba Goldfields with a large man-made dredger tailings piles called training walls flanking the north and south edges of the river, as well as bisecting the floodplain and separating the main channel from its floodplain. Next slide, please. The project was designed with the mindset that removing unnatural constraints to river processes will yield the greatest benefits. This graphic shows a typical section of the existing conditions in the top panel and project conditions on the bottom panel. The main channel is on the left side, and you can see the 2 large tailing piles together called the middle training wall in the middle of the screen, which separate the main channel from the floodplain on the right. A key habitat enhancement action is working with Tykert to to remove gravel and cobble from the middle training wall, as well as other high elevation floodplain areas. We are also carving in a network of seasonal and perennial channels that will inundate across a wide range of flows. All of this is intended to increase the lateral connectivity of the river with its floodplain and increase the frequency and duration of inundation to provide rearing juvenile salmonids suitable habitat to grow larger and stronger before emigrating out to the ocean. We'll also be performing riparian planting, and the lowered floodplain areas are hypothesized to facilitate some natural recruitment of vegetation as well. Next slide, please. Here you can see the topography of the site in its pre-project condition. It doesn't actually look like this any longer. And of particular interest is the middle training wall, running approximately 2 miles long down the middle of the river corridor, sitting anywhere from 40 to 100 feet above the surrounding floodplain elevations. And so this is the line that's basically running down the middle of the floodway, and you can see 2 ridges that together we refer to as the middle training wall. You can also see where a section of the formerly continuous middle training wall was naturally eroded away during the high flows of 2017. Next slide, please. This aerial image shows some of the key landmarks. The Gare Point Dam is shown in the upper right corner, along with Tykert's Hallwood Processing Facility to the north of the channel and the Goldfields to the south. We can also see the north training wall along the river right or northern portion, the middle training wall, and the south training wall, all, or what's left of the south training wall, all designated with the red lines as shown. At the downstream end, on the lower left of the overflow channel, you can see a series of large deep ponds, one of which has been named the Blue Lagoon, that in the pre-project condition provided habitat for predators of juvenile salmonids. You can also see the middle training wall running along the length of the site and the north and south training walls, which I already pointed out. The video shown in the next slide is taken from approximately the location of the River Mile 10 marker shown in the middle of the slide along the middle training wall. Next slide, please. If we, okay, it's moving. This drone video is looking downstream and is showing the rough grading activities that occurred in April 2020. To lower the gravel bar along the main channel off to the left and make way for a seasonal channel in that area. Tykert Construction utilized push-pull scrapers and dozers to grade down and remove approximately 150,000 cubic yards of sediment from this feature. In the distance, you can see the conveyor system where a front loader is scooping material into a hopper and sending it directly to the processing facility. Next slide, please. This imagery was taken in early July of this year, right before fine grading of habitat channels began. You can see the result of the rough grading down the gravel bar along the main channel and the seasonal channel along the center. As we pan toward the middle training wall, you can see Tykert's conveyor system, which has been extended further to the east or upstream along the footprint of the middle training wall and the processing plant to the north. A loader is bringing a bucket of sediment to the hopper. Now we are looking east and upstream. Note the size of the middle training wall or what's left of it. Off to the left, you can see the high and dry overflow channel that was rough graded down earlier this year to make way for the perennial channel and floodplain in that area. The perennial channel will disconnect when the river drops to spawning flows late in the summer, but will remain connected to groundwater through an infiltration gallery at the inlet. Further east, you can see the phase 2 area and the 2 middle training wall ridges that will be removed in the next phase to increase lateral connectivity there. On the bottom left, and this, as the video stops, is where the inlet to the perennial channel is shown. Next slide, please. Here we see the interim conditions as of September. We can see that the perennial channel, which has been carved, is well connected to groundwater and does not have a surface water connection at the upstream end at this point. Fine habitat grading has occurred, will continue into October. As we move upstream, we can also see alcove features on the right and left banks, which carve channels into existing mature vegetation to provide high quality habitat immediately once the project is open up. This is the rough grading. Fine grading is actually being completed right now as we speak. Next slide, please. Phase 2 of the application, or our phase 2 application, sorry. Let me move my notes out of the way. I apologize. Our phase 2 of the project includes 34 acres of enhancement, which includes approximately 800,000 cubic yards of sediment removal. It will include 1.5 miles of seasonal channels to be created, as well as approximately 1 acre of riparian planting. This next phase, as with phase 1, is funded by both U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Yuba Water Agency. Next slide, please. The timeline for phase 2 is as follows. Assuming our encroachment permit application is approved, we would plan to install a bridge to connect to the phase 2 area, which is effectively an island at this point. That would be flow condition dependent, assuming that we are not having a very wet winter. So that would happen in April. Then in April through September, rough grading activities would occur. And then October through November, fine grading and planting would occur, pending time variance requests to the board. Next slide, please. I'll now pass it over to Rick Reinhardt of MBK Engineers to provide an update on 2 important adjacent projects.
Good morning, President Edgar, Vice President Dolan, members of the board. Rick Reinhardt with MBK Engineers. When the board first issued its permit for phase 1 of the Hallwood Side Channel project, we knew that there was flood risk associated with failure of the north and south training walls. And at the time, there wasn't certainty about how that flood risk was going to be addressed. But since you issued that permit in 2017, Three Rivers, with the support of DWR, secured funding for construction of the Goldfields South Levee. That project is now in construction. It's a 2.6 mile setback levee. It's going to be completed next month. And that, as I know you're very familiar with this project, that completes the final phase of the Three Rivers program to provide 200-year protection of this area. Next slide, please. What you might not be as familiar with is the North Training Wall project. With the areas mined out on the north side of the North Training Wall, if the North Training Wall fails, the floodwaters go into the community of Hallwood. It can lead to failure of the Panhandle Levee, increasing flood stages on both the Marysville Ring Levee as well as the District 10 Levee. Three Rivers, with $1 million in grant funds from Yuba Water Agency, is proceeding with a project to design that North Training Wall to meet 100-year standards. But because we're in a little bit of a unique situation where we're working with an existing training wall and we have ample material available, we're going to design it to the 200-year water surface plus a foot, and the top of the embankment is going to be set to contain the 500-year flood event. We're pursuing both state and federal grants for implementation of this project. Our goal is to be in construction on phase 1 of the North Training Wall in 2021. And phase 2, which will be needed to meet the ultimate FEMA certification, is to extend the North Training Wall upstream to high ground. And that construction would occur in 2022 or later. Next slide, please. So, President Edgar, you started by asking for a little background because you've got new board members who might not be as familiar with this. I think there's value in telling a little bit of the story of how we got to construction. That when this project was permitted in 2017, the partnership was with an NGO, Circle, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, CVFPB, and Tykert. In May of 2019, this project was on life support and within a month of death. And that death was going to occur if Tykert moved its asphalt plant from the Hallwood mining facility on the north side of the North Training Wall. That Hallwood plant was mined out for aggregate. And if they move the asphalt plant to the Marysville site, it would no longer be cost effective to remove the 3.2 million cubic yards of aggregate from the river that makes this project possible. And one of the most remarkable things I've seen in my career is we went from the project being on life support in May 2019 to being in construction in August of 2019. And that happened because Yuba Water Agency saw the value of this project, stepped in, partnered with a team that already existed, and awarded a $0 contract to Tykert in July of 2019 that allowed this project to go forward. It's not, when we talk about multi-benefit projects, we're usually talking about flood management and flood control. This has a very strong economic element and a strong public-private partnership that I haven't seen before. I think it really is a great story to tell. There were a number of other issues that were impediments to this project being implemented, Special Condition 16 being one of those. As Nate read earlier, the permit condition required that an entity or agency responsible for maintenance and operation prior to completion of the project and or provide progress in seeking an entity or agency responsible for maintenance and operations acceptable to the board prior to the permit issuance for each subsequent project phase. The problem is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't have a funding source to do this. CVFPB was the grant applicant. They're an AE firm. They don't have the ability to do that operation and maintenance, and neither do Tykert. So Yuba Water Agencies come in, they're providing funding, they're the contract entity, but they also don't want to inherit long-term operation maintenance requirements. So as we dug in and we started taking a look at this as a team, what are the issues? The implementation of the project is resulting in reduction of the water surface by 3 feet. In 2017, we didn't have these flood control projects that are being implemented in the South Goldfields and the North Training Wall by Three Rivers. Three Rivers is committing to the long-term OMRR of both of those projects. So from a flood control standpoint, OMRR is addressed. And so as we look at this, the purpose of the project is to remove man-made features from a bygone era of mining in this reach. We're trying to give the river, open it back up to a more natural state. The cost associated with construction, as I said, we have a $0 contract for removal of the aggregate, but Chris highlighted all of the fine grading features that we did pay to construct. And then we're also coming in and planting vegetation. And the intent of both of those is to give Mother Nature a jump start so that we're not waiting 5, 10, 20 years for this to start to yield the results that we want. So as we look at all of this together, we don't see there needing to be a long-term O&M responsibility of what the project is doing, because we're trying to recreate that natural state. And with the flood control features having an agency responsible for OMR&R, we don't think you have a risk from a flood control standpoint. And so that's the basis for us requesting that as part of issuance of phase 2 or standalone action that you consider removing the special condition. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Rick. Yuba Water Agency, or as a project partner, Yuba Water Agency has proposed to plant a larger area than was covered in the initial encroachment permit application. This proposal would increase the amount of riparian planting from 8 acres to 54 acres in total. The extent of the existing vegetation and the proposed planting areas are shown below in this figure in the various shades of green. Next slide, please. Here we present the difference in water surface elevations for the proposed 54 acres of planting at a flow rate of 180,000 CFS. The blue shades are water surface elevation reductions as compared to the existing condition, with the purple area indicating reductions of over 3 feet. The warmer colors, the beige and orange, are increases in water surface elevation. However, they're relatively minor, with a maximum increase of approximately 0.14 foot along an agricultural berm downstream of the project. So even with the additional planting, we are still seeing substantial reductions in water surface elevation and fairly similar or nearly identical increases as to were included with the previous plan. Next slide, please. These were the results of the original plan that only included 8 acres. Besides the difference in color of the background image, the results are very, very similar. Next slide, please. This shows the difference between the original planting plan of 8 acres and where we currently stand with the proposed 54 acres. We can see that the addition of 46 acres of planting has slightly reduced the amount of water surface reductions. However, all of the increases are in areas where we saw dramatic reductions in water surface elevation, such that even with this additional planting, the project is still substantially lowering water surface elevations and is not posing any additional flood risk as compared to the initial plan that the board had reviewed and approved previously. Next slide, please. Oh, I should also note that the 54 acres of planting is what the North Training Wall team and the project that Rick was previously discussing has been designing to. So they are already taking into account this additional planting as they set their levee crest and freeboard elevations. With that, I'd like to thank you all for taking the opportunity to allow us to present, and we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, members of the board, questions at this point?
Well, I just have a comment. I think this is an incredible project, like Rick Reinhardt mentioned, coming together to solve a problem that helps the environment and helps the flood project. I'm just really astounded by it, and I think it's great work.
Joe, on the issue of having somebody be responsible for long-term maintenance, I'm not concerned about right now, because I think the project's really not going to require any maintenance except maybe somebody to kind of take a look at it and making sure it's operating well. But I'm thinking long-term down the road, 20 years, 10 years, whatever, that we need somebody to be responsible for the long-term maintenance, a public agency that would at least, if there are problems that are occurring, sloughs on the levees, that whatever's happening, take charge of at least be responsible for taking a look at this and raising problem areas that we could resolve down the road?
Well, I don't know. Maybe Rick can answer this, but the project itself is removal of the barrier in the center of the project. It's not the levees on either side. So,
right. I'm thinking more of the vegetation that's being planted in there, if that's going to cause a problem with operations and so on. Aren't we, who's going to pay attention to that down the road?
President Edgar.
Yes.
This condition is an impediment to implementation of restoration projects. You're asking local agencies to sign a blank check in perpetuity. I know that this is an issue that Solano County Water Agency has raised with me with projects that they're doing on Puda Creek. These agencies are pursuing grant funds to help restore the environment, but they're not willing to sign on to an undefined in perpetuity obligation. If we want to see these projects implemented, I think we've got to be more targeted in what our concerns are. in this case, currently no one maintains the floodway. We have two facilities, the north and south training wall, that provide flood protection, that do not have a flood control purpose and are not operated and maintained. In this instance, Three Rivers is coming in and addressing the flood management issues in this reach. I would say that I don't think it's reasonable to ask a local agency who's trying to do a good thing and help the environment to sign an open-ended blank check in perpetuity.
Well, Rick, let's assume that down the road, problems come up with this area. Who then is responsible? The department or us or Fish and Wildlife or who? Who's responsible once all the consultants and all the, the environmental agencies don't have any money to do anything? So who takes charge and proposes remedial action if any's required?
If something happens, you gave an example of sloughing of the levees or sloughing of the features that Three Rivers is constructing. Three Rivers would be responsible for those. The project is reducing water surface elevations by 3 feet. With stage reductions of 3 feet by removing 3.2 million cubic yards, there's not a scenario where vegetation overgrowth or snags or other things increase it beyond the baseline. Sediment is going to continue coming down the system. That sediment that's feeding into the system could become a problem in 50, 75 years, but that's a natural process. Our goal isn't to maintain in perpetuity what we construct. Our goal is to remove man-made impediments and restore the river's natural function. There's not a way of doing that doesn't have some very small risk associated with it. I won't say that there's no risk, but I would say the risk of there being a problem in the channel that is not associated with the flood control features that Three Rivers is constructing and operating and maintaining, that risk is extremely small.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with that in the short term. I'm just worried about the long term and the experience we've had in terms of increasing the level of operation and maintenance for the whole system that we've had in the years that I've been here, and we're just trying to solve some of those issues. And I just hate to leave an area without a public agency at least being responsible for looking into it. And maybe this is an area that we just look at and decide, as maybe we do at Dos Rios or something like that, that we don't assign it to a particular public agency, but we recognize that no one's responsible, and if problems occur, the department or the board are going to have to, based on input from the local residents, are going to have to come in and take charge and do something about it. I'm just worried about not having a overlaying agency responsible for the ongoing functioning of the project in the long term.
Well, I do think that that's the case today. No one is responsible for the north and south training walls. No one is responsible for maintaining this channel.
Yeah, and we have those problems in other parts too, Rick. I mean, there's parts in the north area that Jane Dolan has pointed out that are, for various reasons, not really maintained properly, and the underlying agency it's supposed to be in charge isn't. So, that's the concern I have.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
It's Tim. Can I jump in for a sec?
Oh, yeah, Tim.
I'm glad that we had a chance to get some of the information in advance, and thanks to the folks to pull it together. I'm having a lot of flashbacks to 15, 20 years ago about this very discussion. We don't want to get in the way of people that are trying to do the right thing. At the same time, like you said, we have big picture, long-term concerns. I think there's a spectrum here, and we can figure out where we are on that spectrum. The thing I like about this particular situation is all of the different pieces of the puzzle that were just shared with us, from the side all the way down into the channel, right? So there's a real concerted effort by a lot of different people who are not necessarily involved in this project directly, who are helping to address the concerns that I think we have about the long-term flood management issues. So, this might be a situation where, because of all the things that are surrounding it, we have to decide whether or not we can let go of this condition that we placed in there. I have a vague memory of this discussion, not specific yet. I have to go back and look at my notes. But something tells me that we anticipated this being one of the potential scenarios that would play out, is that people would come together and, given the time, find a way to address the concerns that the board would have. Because the project, I think, said another way, is designed to be self-sustaining, right? They're trying to support the natural function of the river system,
right?
In which case, that's the best that I think we could hope for. They're not putting something in the channel supposed to be there permanently that's an unnatural feature, right? That's not what they're doing. That's another important, I think, consideration to make. There's a lot of work that's been done on the engineering and the modeling that talks about the future conditions and scenarios, which I think is also really important for us to consider and to weigh about whether or not we're able to take this step. So I really appreciate the background. That's very helpful. I also appreciate folks, in the watershed coming together and working together. It is a good story. There's a lot of different partnerships that have been created, and I think they're all headed in the right direction, and it all really makes a big difference when things get to us. We're not in a position to do what has been done locally. The folks on the ground made this happen, right? Yuba County Water Agency, Fish and Wildlife Service, the nonprofit organizations, Tiker, they're the ones that pulled this together. I think because they all saw something in it for them, but also realized that they needed to have it be different. Like Rick said, situation 10 years ago was worse. Nobody had responsibility. It wasn't functioning the way it needed to for salmon. This is better, right? And hopefully we'll find a way to support it.
President Egger?
Yes.
I just wanted to, I'm the newest board member here, but I'm familiar with this project because it's in my backyard. And just to give you perspective of the community and how they feel about the Yuba River, it's a very important river. I mean, environmentally, recreationally, economically, it's very important to the community. And the Water Agency has been a really great steward of that river and all that it entails. So I understand the issue of having somebody responsible, but I also understand the Water Agency not wanting to, pretty much sign a blank check. But they've always stepped up when it was necessary. And because of the community, I think that kind of concern will be addressed as far as maintaining it. And the flood benefits from this 3 feet. That's huge. I mean, and with the Yuba, we've seen the Yuba. I mean, in '86 it broke because of uncontrolled, water coming down the system. So anytime we can reduce the flood elevations to that, and I'm very familiar with that area, and that grading, dredging, whatever you want to call it, is really important, and it really sets a great precedence for other pieces of the river as well. So, I think that what this project is doing is actually undoing the environmental disaster that occurred during the hydraulic mining up in Nevada County for Yuba County. It's interesting because Marysville used to sit on a bowl because of all the hydraulic mining. Now it's in a bowl, and the river is actually higher than the city right now. And so this is just kind of correcting this piece of it from way back when.
Thank you, Mary Jane. The thing that I just want to remind the board members of, that our responsibility, of course, is issuing permits and enforcing compliance. And our tool to do that is the Title 23 regulations. And what I've told Leslie is as we go along and make these kinds of changes and need for remedial or to the changes in those regulations to consider, we'll have to be amending Title 23 to reflect these kinds of projects or programs, so that when we get to the issue of what our job is, and that is to enforce compliance, and we won't have areas that we don't have the tools to do it. And if we have a section in that Title 23 that refers to these types of projects, which is, I don't think anybody's questioning the results of this project or the goals and objectives of the project. It's a great project. But we've got to be able to recognize these kinds of areas so that, you know, in our enforcement areas, we have these options to look at and say, no, we're going to use section whatever it is to you know, reflect our enforcement responsibilities in this area. And as long as our tool, which is Title 23, is consistent with what we're doing on the ground, project by project, then we're in a much better shape long term to do our jobs. But right now, we've got a set of regulations that's so far out of date that we have no tools. And the regulations themselves are, as we found out with the fences that we were dealing with last year, it's very hard to deal with these issues if we don't have our tools up to date. So if there's a way to approach this on a long-term basis, I'm all for it. But we've got to think about the long term.
Well, it seems that I understand what the goal is, but it's like, are we going to take a stick and poke ourselves in the eye and say, look, if you want to do good, if you want to improve the capacity and the efficiency of the flood control system, you have to take on a responsibility you currently don't have. And so you stop the project because of it. Even though it helps flood control, it helps the environment, it's multi-purpose, but we're trying to enforce someone to take responsibility for something where they don't have responsibility. And I think that's the problem I have with it. I mean, this project, I don't see any way that this project is going to impede now or in the future the capacity of the Yuba River system. I mean, a lot of material is being removed out of the middle of that river to improve the hydraulic efficiency through there. So I think we need to consider that.
Yeah, all I'm saying is we have to have the regulations reflect that, Joe. If that's the desire of the board, which makes sense to me too, we're going to have to make sure our ducks are in a line, because they are.
I appreciate the comment about the regs. I feel like sometimes we're trying to, in the 21st century, permit projects from the 19th century, right?
Right.
And it's the language doesn't exist, and so maybe it's a good reminder for us that we need to think about that when we get back to those updates. Maybe there's a place and a way to do that so that we can point to something that provides people the certainty that they need, but also, not just supports, but encourages these kinds of efforts, right? We want more of this. And to some extent, the discussion this morning on the San Joaquin was very similar, right? We have people trying to bend the rules as best they can, to get fish through the system, and at the same time maintain capacities. And it's hard because the system was built so long ago without the things now that we have in place in terms of the regulations and authorities. So I really
Right.
appreciate the comment you made. I think it's important for us to think about that when we get back to the regs.
Yeah, that's my concern, and we're running every project that's kind of innovative like this is, and is, you know, on the cutting edge and things that we want to do, and we've seen a number of them come through. Every project like that is inconsistent with our regulations, so we've got to do something about that, because that'll make it very difficult to do our job if we don't.
Maybe we're just old, need to catch up, Bill. What do you think?
We're what?
We've been around for a long time. You know, as an organization, the authorities we have are old.
Oh,
I
they
know you
are.
know that, and I know that's why we're updating them. I'm making a point. I think that I don't need to make probably, but it's time for us it's time for us to update the regulations so we can better capture some of these things that are happening now. These are all good examples, and I think we need to find a way to fold them into it.
Well, and incentivize them. I mean, if we're really serious about what we're doing, we shouldn't depend on the water agency to come in and do the kinds of things it's done, which is great. We should be doing that, and we should be, that should be allowed in our regulations and so on. So anyway, just trying to align our authorities.
President Egger, I like what I'm hearing, and I'll tell you from my perspective of serving as the chairman of Three Rivers, I have been noted to say at some of the core meetings that it's a new day, it's a new way. And what Board Member Ramirez said was correct. Innovative thinking is being stopped by old time regulations, and whether it's on the state or federal level, it really needs to be re-examined. And so I'm supporting that we, do what needs to be changed on these regulations in order to keep this kind of innovative projects moving forward, and seeing this board as more than just a regulator and a permit process, but also that they commend these types of innovative projects. So if there's a way to move forward on this, I'm supportive of that, and I'm glad to hear my other board members say the same.
Yeah.
President Edgar.
Okay. Yes. Yes, Brian.
I've been enjoying this conversation. If I may, I know what people have been saying, and if maybe a need to, rethink this systematically, and I would certainly sign up for to do that. I'll say that I don't think that we need that in order to help this particular project move forward. I am new to the board, but I've been familiar with this project for a while, and I watched, the video last time and the staff report. It's intended to and it provides maintaining the flood system are on the way this project, could possibly worse from where we are now, or by not having condition 16 lose something that we have now. As board member Countryman said, in 2017, when this project goes through the whole from the perspective of the flood risk management system. So, given that, which is our, sources in our jurisdiction, and also the fact that the flood plan and doing a lot more of this type of thing, the executive order that Darren cited for agencies like us to increase the pace and scale of environmental restoration. I realize this is an informational item, and so I'll withhold the vote for the time when we have the vote and the actual staff recommendation, but I'm confident we can move forward, and I look forward to in a way that increases the pace and scale of restoration for projects like this.
Okay, well, I just remind our legal counsel that we've been trying to get these regulations updated for ever since I've been on the board, and we haven't made much progress, to be honest, and we're going to have to do that. Jeet, I hope you're listening.
I am, President Edgar. Thank you. I just wanted to actually chime in and respond to some of the comments. I would just like to point out that our regs don't technically require long-term maintenance plans as a part of a permit. Those are more condition requirements, and those can change on a case-by-case basis. So I know it has been an emphasis in the past by the board that we identify a long-term maintainer, if you could say, for these habitat restoration projects. But that could certainly be revisited, and the board can. And I think perhaps that we should be looking at these things a little more closely instead of painting them with a broad brush. And maybe do a little bit of a better job. And when we bring these types of projects to the board for their consideration, really examine whether or not, and the recommendations, whether long-term maintenance condition is required in these permits. That's really the sticking issue, I believe.
Okay, great. Okay,
Mr. President, if I could just mention that I think the staff actually did an amazing job on this project, and the long-term maintenance was a specific request of a sitting board member at the time, and it reflected the board's priorities at that moment in time, which can certainly change and switch, and you know, we're perfectly happy to do whatever the board's will is on this, but that was why that condition was added and why it is there. Which is why also the board needs to make the decision if they do want to remove it, to remove it. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. I certainly wasn't trying to designate or denigrate board staff and their efforts in this. I do remember working on them on this project, and that was one of the issues that came up. And Executive Officer Gallagher is exactly right. It was. For lack of a better term, a board policy or an expectation that there would be a long-term maintainer identified. And if you recall, there wasn't one, but the condition was that Fish and Wildlife would find one as a permit condition because they didn't have one identified at that point in time when they were seeking the permit.
Yeah, I think, Jeet, though, that, as Rick Reinhardt pointed out, that was before the time that we had a lot of these other issues resolved, like the flood protection projects that he pointed out, and the progress that they've made in getting, you know, some of that other stuff done. So it would be logical to reconsider that condition, certainly at this point. But things have changed since the board did look at this in 2017, I think. Anyway, good discussion, you guys. Anything else?
President Edgar, so does the process now start where we ask staff to bring this item back as an action item?
It will be brought back. It will be brought back the next meeting, I believe.
Thank you.
Is that right? Is that right, Leslie?
I believe that's the case, yes. The informational briefing was to give you some time and some context, and there will be a request by this applicant, I believe, at the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you. That was a good discussion and so on. Okay, we're moving on to item B, and this is we're gonna, rather than talk about these ABOs, we're gonna be talking about what we're trying to do here is